This week on the Virtual Skeptics, I have no idea if you can understand what I'm saying because I've got internet problems, but Bob is feeling stabby about Jack the Ripper. Eve's going berserk about Viking women. Barb tells you about those types of people. And I continue my poorly audioed coup and get truthy about it. I am your host, Tim Farley, and this is Virtual Skeptics. On screen, here we are, and again, apologies in advance. I've got some sort of internet issue going on here at the house that I can't figure out, so I may be inaudible. I'll try to let everyone else talk more than me. I'm hosting this week, as you may have noticed, in place of Brian. Our panel for this week is Bob Blaskiewicz, who is CSI's Conspiracy Guy web columnist, blogger for Skeptical Humanities, and Swift blog contributor. He's taking selfies or something.
No, I was taking pictures of y'all.
Oh, okay. Eve Siebert, editor and blogger at Skeptical Humanities and a contributor to Skepticality. Myself, Tim Farley, former JREF fellow, blogger at SkepTools, Skepticality contributor and creator of What's the Harm. And Barbara Drescher, a former psychology instructor, blogger at ICBS Everywhere, and contributor to numerous skeptical projects, including The Odds Must Be Crazy. Hi, everybody.
Hi, Tim.
How are you doing?
We didn't say that in unison.
Hi, Tim.
Hi, Tim.
Do I still sound like a robot, or am I sounding okay?
Sometimes.
A little bit at times, but it's much better.
Okay. I'll try to talk slowly. We are live, if you're watching us on Wednesday, September 10th, and if you are, you can ask us questions. The Q&A app is live, and there is a new app, and I have no idea how it works because Google just told me about it when we started it, but it's called Applause, and you may see it down there somewhere. And it's a way for you to tell us when we're doing something that you like. So if somebody says something funny or is doing a topic that you like, I don't know. It's new, so
Somebody try it.
You do.
Try it now.
Yeah, someone do it now. You may have to be watching it from the Google Plus side as opposed to YouTube in order for that to work. That's usually where all the little gewgaws are. To get there, click on the little Q&A thing right here. Click on that, and that will take you to Google Plus. But you can also ask us questions on the YouTube if you're watching us from there, or on Twitter using Virtual Skeptics hashtag. So this week, let's see, our normal flow is to do a trivia question. It's September, and in the U.S., September is usually the month that a lot of TV shows premiere, historically. And today is actually the anniversary of both, oddly enough, on the very same day, September 10th, 1993, Bill Nye the Science Guy and The X-Files premiered on the same day, oddly enough. Both of interest to skeptics. This Saturday, September 13th, is the anniversary of another program that's of interest to skeptics, much older. What TV program premiered on September 13th and is relevant to skeptics? So that's our trivia question.
And I think people should also try to guess what's on Brian Gregory's computer screens.
That'd be impressive.
Yeah.
Which is
Might actually
really
look at that.
Exactly. And our lineup this week is Barb is first, right? So
I think so.
Barb is up. Barb.
I'm going to try not to talk too long, but since I didn't make a lot of notes, I'm going to kind of talk off my head. So tell me to shut up if I go too long. So this is something that I talked a little bit about at DragonCon in a panel with Vandy Beth Glenn on gender, science, and skepticism. And there are some facets to this. This is really just kind of one point that I want to make, but it's a complex point. So there's, for the most part, you know, skeptics, we're always talking amongst ourselves about how to do better activism and so forth. These are complex questions. There's a lot of questions about, you know, if we make fun of Jenny McCarthy, will people vaccinate their kids, or should we be nicer? You know, there's a lot of tone arguments. People kind of, in my experience, a lot of skeptics tend to rely on this, hey, there are lots of different approaches and we should just try them all. And I'm not so thrilled with that. I think there are lots of different approaches, but there are some that we have plenty of science says don't work very well or not very effective, and sometimes they're even harmful. And it's kind of difficult to get this across to skeptics who are not psychologists. Wow, I have a program trying to update, sorry. Because they want to see this, the one study that tested this exactly, and the outcome was, you know, clear. And that's not how social sciences work. But just because we can't point to a single study that says, yes, this approach is better than that approach, doesn't mean that we don't have any knowledge about that. We usually have a lot of knowledge, and we have a lot of knowledge about some questions. And one of them is about how to reduce prejudice. And that includes sexism as well as racism and other things. Or at least we have a lot of evidence about how to not go about trying to reduce these things. So I want to talk a little bit about, one of the points I need to make is about bigotry and intergroup conflict. And anybody who's familiar with, say, the Robbers Cave experiment will understand this. The Robbers Cave experiment was a rather unethical experiment done in, I think it was the 60s, at a summer camp for boys. And they basically divided the boys into groups, into teams, and they created conflict, and they made sure that the kids had to compete. And what they ended up with was a bunch of bigots. I mean, they hated each other. They were verbally abusive. The abuse escalated. It became physical abuse. They actually had to separate the kids. And then they had a little cooling off period. And then they put the kids back together, and all together. And rather than being parts of teams, they had them work on projects or solve problems that furthered a goal that they would all have. You know, like how to how to get a movie. You know,
Escape
things
the
like
camp.
that. How to escape the camp? Yeah. Actually, I think sometimes people enjoy that sort of thing. So, but what happened was the boys ended up leaving all as friends. Okay, the conflict was reduced. There were no longer these prejudices because they all worked toward a common goal. And we've done. I will never forget when I was in grad school. I had a mentor at the time who had been studying intergroup conflict for about 30 years, and her approach was mostly to go into high schools. It was very applied research. So she actually went into high schools and put these programs in place, and they failed over and over and over again. And she learned a lot about how not to reduce conflict, because she would go into inner city schools in LA and try to reduce racial conflict. There was a lot of violent conflict between races in those schools, mostly Latinos and African Americans. So this was a big problem, and one of the ways that they used to approach it was their very multicultural approach. You get all the kids together and you all talk about your culture and you celebrate your differences. And unfortunately, that approach has the opposite effect on prejudice. Why? Because it draws attention to the ways that people are different instead of drawing attention to the ways that people are the same. Much like the Robbers Cave problem. So when we draw attention to the way that people are different, they automatically think about how they're different, even if they're trying to think in terms of celebrating those differences. What we really need to be doing is bringing people together and looking beyond the ways that we are different, especially those things that we can't control, like gender and race. So in order to get along, we kind of need to be blind to irrelevant characteristics. So this brings me to issues of sexism. Okay. And I was kind of, the panel that I was on was about gender, and so I'm kind of primed for this issue, so I want to apply it to gender. We need to be gender blind in issues that are not related to gender, like job performance and things like that. Gender is a very important category, especially when we're looking for a mate. We're very good at telling genders apart at a very young age. But when we're in environments where gender should not be an issue, the key to it being not an issue is gender blindness. And this is why I know this is controversial, but I want to show Harriet Hall's t-shirt from TAM a few years ago. Because there's a reason why she said this. It wasn't to offend anybody. Can we bring that up?
Yeah.
This t-shirt caused a lot of problems in the community. But I don't want to look at it as something that she wasn't trying to cause problems. She was trying to make a statement, and this is part of the statement that I'm trying to make. So Harriet's t-shirt says, and you can see, whoa, it's not coming up on my screen. Can somebody read that? There it is. I'm a skeptic, not a skeptic, not a woman skeptic, just a skeptic. Now you can see why that might cause some problems. It looks like it's targeted at skeptics. And I can't say whether it was or not, but that's not really the point. The point is that she's trying to say, I don't want to be viewed as a woman here. I'm a skeptic here. You have to see beyond the gender. And I think that's a salient point. I wanted to read a very short quote from Cordelia Fine's Delusions of Gender. After discussing a lot of the literature on how priming gender creates or brings up stereotypes, how people actually respond when gender is brought to the surface. So if priming is basically getting somebody ready for some experience. She summed it up by saying, when gender is salient in the environment or we categorize somebody as male or female, gender stereotypes are automatically primed. We have tons and tons of literature on this. I think Bob and I were having a conversation a couple weeks ago about stereotype threat. Mm-hmm. The reason that we see effects of stereotype threat is because we have primed people for a stereotype. And stereotype threat is basically the idea that if you believe that let's say it's girls in a math class, if you believe that you're not supposed to do well at something like math because of a stereotype, sometimes people actually live up to that. Okay. Sometimes they actually do the opposite, something called compensatory rivalry, where they actually compensate for the expectation and do better than they would if they had not had that primed. But sometimes the priming of the stereotype actually creates the self-fulfilled prophecy of not performing well. So that brings me to why this was actually also part of an article that Harriet wrote for Skeptic that she recently posted on Facebook, and we talked about during our gender panel. She talks about how she's not a member of any professional women's organizations and things like that, and neither am I. I'm very reluctant to actually talk about sexism in a sisterhood kind of way. And this is why, because I understand the literature. I understand what all the literature says about attention and priming, and for me, that is summed up by saying, okay, if we draw attention to the fact that we're women, we're defeating our own purpose. So I wanted to talk about that here because it's been foremost on my mind, and because there is a lot of science here, and if we're denying the science, we're denying science. So it's a valid argument to make that groups. It's a valid argument to make. It's not a strong argument, but it is a valid argument to make, and it's a valid thing to discuss whether or not groups that are formed specifically, exclusively for women, help the cause or perhaps even harm it. Okay. That's all I wanted to say. Did we have any questions? You guys are saying nothing, so I'm kind of going.
This is like one of those topics that right now, like, I feel I could very easily stick both feet in my mouth.
Yeah, understood. Understood.
No, it's a totally legitimate question about what is the best way and understanding how group dynamics work. Yeah, totally.
Well,
Eve, you're a woman, right?
I'm a virtual skeptic.
thank you. Not a skeptic or a woman skeptic, a virtual skeptic.
Yeah, although I would say in our field, sort of literary studies and also history, I see a real point to studying, because women's voices have been silenced for years, looking at how women are treated. But that's kind of a different thing.
I agree. And I don't think that we are yet to the point where we need to be ignoring the cause of promoting women. I do think we are still somewhat oppressed. I feel somewhat oppressed still, although much, much less oppressed than I did 20 years ago when I was experiencing sexual harassment in the workplace, like real harassment, like real assaults. But as opposed to fake assault.
Never mind.
I mean, things that by real, I mean things that I could have sued for had I had the presence of mind to do so. But at the time, that was not a culturally acceptable thing to do. In the early '80s, or the mid '80s, or the late '80s. But I think that we do need to pay a little bit of attention to it. I just think that when we draw too much attention to the problem, we're actually harming our own cause. We're not serving our purposes, because tokenism doesn't help anybody either, and nor does it help to paint us as victims or helpless, that sort of thing, in my opinion.
Right.
So
I have to say, I know, God, I shouldn't say this, but
Do it. Go.
A little bit bothered about things like women's studies programs, because I always feel like, are we just ghettoizing ourselves?
I think there's some arguments to be made there. I've seen some efforts at universities and colleges recently that disturb me a little bit, that I think do have the potential to ghettoize and marginalize women. And that's not the goal. The goal is to earn equality.
And other groups as well.
Yes.
I'm just choosing the one that I'm sort of a part of.
What do you think about efforts to increase diversity in environments where it's been a problem?
Well, I think that things like affirmative action were necessary when they were needed to help us along, just like the civil rights movement was needed to help change the way that African Americans were treated, or I don't know what the PC term is anymore. It keeps going back and forth from that to black. So I think that they were needed. I don't know that we need them so much anymore. I think we've got a lot of momentum, and I think we have a danger of swinging too far, the pendulum swinging too far. So I'm in the middle there. I really am. I just think that these are valid things to be talking about, and I think that there's so much sacralized ideology out there that people are afraid to even talk about it. And these are things that people need to hear and face.
I've had a blog post ending tools for a while. I just had finished writing, and the premise of the post is that there's in the skeptic.
I'm getting the vowels.
Yeah.
Maybe I shouldn't ask the question because
now we can hear you. Can you say it again?
I have this pending blog post about diversity in speakers at skeptic conferences, and the Skept Tools spin on it was to use the data on Lanyard to scrape out a sort of a virtual speakers bureau of all the women speakers that have spoken at Skeptic conferences, not just the ones in the CFI Speakers Bureau or the SSA Speakers Bureau, but kind of a virtual speakers bureau of all the ones who have ever spoken, and make a list and say, look, people who are inviting speakers, here's a huge list of women who not only can speak at your event, but have spoken. And in some cases, there are videos of. Here's a good
To
way.
allow them to be vetted, yeah.
Because we all.
Not hearing any of this.
Oh.
There you go.
There's always that
But it sounds sort of like an instrument.
It does. It's that, but I think it works better when you talk really slow. Honestly,
It's like MIDI, Tim.
Yeah.
xylophone, Tim.
Don't worry, you're still pretty.
I don't know. The problem I have is when
Don't objectify.
When people say, "Hey, we need women," they're usually going to go for the first person that pops up in their head, and that's their friend. So having lists might be helpful. At the same time, I don't want to be on a list of women speakers because I don't want to be chosen as a speaker because
you're a woman. Yeah.
That's not helpful. It doesn't help anybody.
Yep.
At the same time, I do think that organizers need to be cognizant of it and need to make that little extra effort to try to get to as close to parity as they can, while still ensuring that the quality of the content is there.
Okay. Okay. I will try to speak as little as possible. So the next person up is
Me.
Eve.
Yep.
Eve.
And good news, I'm also talking about sexism.
I saw that on the list and I laughed.
Yeah.
Yay.
Well, according to several websites this past week, such as Bustle, Tor.com, and Boing Boing, half of Viking warriors were women. And the only reason we didn't know about this beforehand is because sexist archaeologists are sexist. Hey, you can bring up my slide anytime. It's not really geared to anything in particular. My favorite of these articles, I think, was Emma Cueto of Bustle. She says there may have been an equal number of Viking warrior women because, hell yeah, there were. That's a quote.
That's a quote. That's a quote.
And this is awesome reasoning and hardly tautological at all. The title of her article, by the way, is Women Viking Warriors Existed, Confounding Sexist Scientists Everywhere. Now, I would have gone with Viking warrior women they don't want you to know about.
Is a little applause thing going?
It should be.
Then again, I think I might have actually done some real research, which Ms. Cueto apparently didn't bother to do. It's the most ironic article I've read in a long time. It's really spectacular. Because why would you look at the evidence when you can just sort of throw a hissy fit? I mean, why the crap would you want to check your facts before accusing a whole bunch of people, if not an entire field, of being sexist? It's silly. Anyway, she says, and again, this is a quote, "The historical notion that there were no female Viking warriors may be based in nothing more than female warriors being classed as male after being buried with swords. Because why would you check something like that? No one's ever found female Viking warriors, right? If we're imposing our own ideas about gender back onto the past, that's not only bad for the modern fight for gender equality, but it's also just bad science. So if archaeologists could stop making sexist assumptions and maybe start being thorough researchers, that would be great. Sound good, guys? And some of this would be okay if she'd actually read the research. Anyway, what she's talking about but hasn't read is Shane McLeod's article, Warriors and Women, the Sex Ratio of Norse Migrants to Eastern England up to 900 AD, published in Early Medieval Europe, the journal, in 2011. So it's not a new story. But, of course, actually, she's not talking about that. She's talking about a USA Today article and a Jezebel article about McLeod's article, which were both also published in 2011. McLeod's article is not about warrior women at all. It's about female Norse settlers. His abstract says, which gives you the best idea of what he's talking about, various types of evidence have been used in the search for Norse migrants to eastern England in the latter 9th century. Most of the data gives the impression that Norse females were far outnumbered by males. By using burials that are almost certainly Norse and that have also been sexed osteologically, provides very different results for the ratio of male to female Norse migrants. Indeed, it suggests that female migration may have been as significant as male, and that Norse women were in England from the earliest stages of the migration, including during the campaigning period from 865. Did you hear anything in there about warrior women? Anyone? Anyone? No, because there's nothing in there about warrior women. He's only talking about women and children, by the way, who may have accompanied the great heathen army of the 860s.
Wait, 1/3 of all Vikings were children?
Yes. Of the 860s and 870s, and then a later force from the 890s.
Actually, I think 100% of Vikings were children.
At one point.
At some point.
Yes, that's very good.
So he's talking about a very narrow time frame, a very narrow geographical area, and he's talking about, wait for it, 14 burials. 14. Which is a tiny sample even for that very narrow focus. It's an interesting find. There's nothing wrong with the article, but frankly it's problematic even to say that half the Norse migrants to eastern England between 850 and 900 were female. Much less Viking warrior women, which, again, he says nothing about.
Mentioned.
He does say that osteological examination is a better way of determining the sex of human remains, than just looking at grave goods. One of the burials he considers contains weapons, but the bones were determined to be female. Another burial also contains weapons. That's a double burial. One of the bodies was female. The other was a juvenile whose sex couldn't be determined. And that, of course, is where the supposed sexism comes in. And, of course, it's true archaeologists should look at whatever data is available, so that they should look at bone evidence as well as grave goods. However, osteological examination isn't a slam dunk either. I know Bob saw a lot of skeptics linking to the stories about the Viking women on Twitter and Facebook. And aside from the feminist angle, I think they may have been seduced by the osteology angle because it sounds sciencey. While looking at grave goods sounds like something that people in the humanities might do. Ew, ick.
Those people make me crazy.
But sometimes there isn't bone evidence at all. Bones can disappear. McLeod actually cites an article that dealt with burials in Western England in, I think, roughly the same time period where the bone evidence was lacking. All they have is grave goods. And so you have to be careful in saying, well, it looks like a male grave without saying, oh, it's totally male. But, you know. And then sometimes the bone evidence is ambiguous. If the pelvis isn't entire or intact, that particularly can be a problem. Sometimes burials are a mess, with bones jumbled together, or one burial ground intercut with another. Cremations are a huge problem. And MacLeod is actually, some of the burials he's discussing are cremations. So both osteological examination and analysis of grave goods are limited, but useful. Martin Rundqvist of Aardvarkeologist is a Swedish archaeologist and a skeptic. As far as I know, he hasn't written about MacLeod's article specifically, but last year he did write about shield maidens, which are supposed Viking warrior women. And he notes that bone evidence and grave goods are overwhelmingly in accord. And that's, for the most part, that's even true of the burials that MacLeod discusses. But particularly in well-furnished graves, they're usually in accord over a wider span of area and time than what MacLeod is talking about. So while sometimes a man will be buried with a dainty bit of jewelry and sometimes a woman will have a weapon, it's very rare that a woman would be buried with like full male kit and vice versa. He also suggests that without a woman being buried with full male kit, then probably it doesn't indicate that she's a warrior. Because he mentions if there's a dainty necklace in a man's grave, does it mean the man was wearing the dainty necklace or that his wife put it in the grave as he was being buried? We don't necessarily know why a woman...
wealth of disposable...
Yeah, so we don't really know why, if a woman has a sword, it might be because she was a warrior, but we don't necessarily know that's the case. We just don't have enough evidence. And both Rundqvist and MacLeod also note something else that's kind of important. As I said, there are problems with the osteological examinations. One of them is that female remains are more likely to be misidentified than male remains. According to Rundqvist, osteological sexing is a method with a margin of error. That margin is greater the more decomposed or cremated the skeleton is, and missexing is biased towards masculinity because old women who have worked hard have less feminine skeletal characteristics. Oh my God. Osteological examination is biased towards men. How deep does the rabbit hole of archaeological sexing go?
To the bottom of the grave cut.
Yeah. In brief, no study has shown that 50% of warriors...
6 feet.
Yeah.
There you go.
No study has shown that 50% of Viking warriors were women. All evidence suggests that female warriors of the Viking Age were a huge rarity, which doesn't mean that women weren't very important in that period. And Ms. Cueto, let the nice archaeologists do their jobs, and you might want to actually read what you're talking about. I'm just saying.
Yeah. Because of course.
I had myself muted. Great. We've had some great interaction.
Not a clue.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, I think we should have a
whatever it was
little. I think we
great.
should have a contest to guess what Tim's saying.
Yeah.
I'm going to hold up cards. I'm going to skip my topic.
We should get that sign language interpreter from Nelson Mandela's funeral.
Bob.
All right. So, this week, the mystery of Jack the Ripper's identity was finally resolved. You can look at this as a sort of sexism. But no, a book called Naming Jack the Ripper identifies, and if you could bring up the first image, identifies this beautifully sideburned individual, Aaron Kosminski, a 23-year-old Polish Jew and masturbating schizophrenic barber, as the murderer who spent a good part of late 1888 carving up London prostitutes. Kosminski was a suspect at the time, and he died in a mental institution. I think he died of gangrene. But he's always been on the list of potential suspects for Jack the Ripper. So why should we take this seriously now? Everyone, literally everybody, has been accused of Jack the Ripper. Lewis Carroll, Helena Blavatsky was accused. Prince Albert's son have all been accused of Jack the Ripper. Hell, even Eve came under suspicion. If you could bring up the image, even Eve came under suspicion this week following an especially disturbing promotional tweet for Virtual Skeptics, where she threatened to rip out my lungs and drape them over my shoulders. Okay? So, which really is disturbingly Ripper-like, I would just say. So,
well, just look at her, man.
But
yeah, I know.
Bob, are you saying you're a prostitute?
Huh? I am not a prostitute, although in graduate school I was a ghostwriter, which is kind of like it. Okay, so
thank you for that image, by the way, Eve. I can't get it out of my head.
Oh yeah. So don't you oppress us, sex workers? Okay, so the author of the new book is Russell Edwards, and he says that his evidence is different. This time it's DNA, and people are positively dippy for DNA. The idea is that there was a shawl that was found at the Fourth River crime scene. If you could bring up the next image of the shawl. There you go. That this shawl was taken home by a police officer, was never washed, and has both the victim's blood and the perpetrator's semen on it. New techniques allow degraded DNA to be sequenced, and this is how Edwards came up with the identity of Kosminski. Science! Almost! Okay, so the press seems to be more accepting of this case this time around. Historian Guy Walters, in his Sydney Morning Herald article titled, quote, titled "It's Case Closed for Jack the Ripper," says, quote, "Even though I'm a historian who delights in debunking junk history, this time I'm convinced. The reason," he says, "is that the DNA is, quote, a 100% match." And he contrasts this rather unsurprising suspect with some of the sensationalist stuff from other, Ripperologists, which is apparently a thing. This clearly gives this report more of an air of respectability. It's not, Queen Victoria for once, or the Earl of Oxford, or whatever, right?
Ooh.
But there are
Earl of Oxford. Yeah.
That was a dig, right? Okay, so there are lots of problems, though. The first one, number one, provenance. I found nothing that assures me that the shawl could be linked to the fourth victim, Catherine Eddowes. No evidence that a police officer took it, or why the hell you'd want to take a semen and blood-stained shawl from a crime scene.
And
then
give it to your wife.
And give it to your wife, and she doesn't want to wash it. I mean, it just doesn't make any sense to me, but whatever. It's very yucky and also very just so. Okay, fine. The conditions in which the shawl was kept are the second reason I'm concerned. Not in a sterile environment. Member of the Eddowes family have been or at least descendants related to her have been in contact with it, so there's the chance of contamination. 3, there's no assurance about the conditions in which the DNA was tested. You need to do that right, even at a professional lab. Consider Melba Ketchum's man-bear pig, or, yeah, the panda Bigfoot dog, right? So you need to make sure that that testing is done correctly. 4th, it was first published in the Daily Mail, not a peer-reviewed journal. 5th, the announcement accompanies a book. 6th, the DNA is mitochondrial DNA, and this has its own problems. It's passed along from the mother to children, so there are any number of people who share that DNA. The best you can say is that Kosminski and many other Polish Jews haven't been ruled out. But this suggests the seventh problem, that the maternal DNA is from the perpetrator. She was a prostitute. There could have been any number of people's semen on her, right? Lastly, and for the purposes of my report anyway, there's a statement that the author, Russell Edwards, made. He said, quote, "I've got the only piece of forensic evidence in the whole history of the case. We have definitely solved the mystery of who Jack the Ripper was. Only non-believers that want to perpetuate the myth will doubt. This is it now. We have unmasked him." Which is really amazing hand-waving there and does not fill me with confidence. In fact, it's like he's sending up the charlatan bat signal. So basically, I would need to see some rigorous fact-checking before I did anything but more than blow my nose in the general direction of this book. And I reserve the right.
Blow your nose on the shawl.
Well, that's actually what someone has said, that people have been wiping their nose on the shawl and, forever. It apparently only really entered the mainstream consciousness, the shawl's existence, in the 1990s. And it's been passed in unsterile environments, from auctioneer to family to buyers to researchers. I mean, there could be all sorts of stuff on there. If you ever have somebody who's a Polish Jew touching it, there's a very good chance that their DNA will be on there, right? So I reserve the right to think that this, bring up the next image, is the only real Ripper. That's a Buffy joke, and only cool people will understand it. If you did not get it, you are in fact not cool. At least not in the right way. So yeah.
There's a right way and a wrong way to be cool?
Yeah.
I thought cool was just cool.
No. There's a whole vetting process that has to be done.
Is there like a checklist? Because I thought it was one of those you know it when you see it things, but
no,
seems to be not.
No.
It's the stuff I like.
Basically, yes.
All right.
It's a very short checklist. Does Bob like it? Chick. So yeah, Ripper. That's what I got.
Does Tim want to try talking?
I was just looking to see if we had questions. Alex says the shawl looks like a lampshade.
Oh, a bad one.
And it's certainly not anything Eddowes could have owned, because she was destitute. And I think there's also a list of her, of the stuff found in her home, and it's not on it. I believe the suggestion made is that the Ripper, for some reason, brought it along.
Yeah,
but
and as a way of giving
is just non-existent.
An obscure, like, it would help if we had some people who'd actually read the book, and understood the science that's being put forward. I haven't seen a lot of that.
Has it been published yet? I know the Daily Mail article came out like a few days before it was published. So
like the day before, yeah. So it's out now. But there are lots of reasons. It's not the first time the shawl has been put forward as evidence of someone.
Was it in the Met's Black Museum for a while, or was that another shawl?
I don't know. I heard that it was. You mean the Metropolitan Police Museum?
Yeah.
But not on display because there was no
Something
provenance.
Like yeah.
Yeah. So
well, another thing I read, and I don't remember quite where I read it, was that the police officer, they say, took it from the crime scene, was a Met police officer, but it was the city police that actually investigated the Jack the Ripper crimes. Whoops.
Whoops. Blake says, I think that Bob saying the new Ripper story is promoted by charlatans. That's a good one. That's a really good one. So, yep.
There was a question for Eve.
Hmm?
Are there any primary sources from the Norse that even mention the warrior women?
That mentions warrior women. There are, and this is kind of too long to discuss. I wrote a blog post about this, and there's more about it there. But most of the stuff about Viking warrior women, like, are mythological, legendary. They're not in the even semi-historical era. And you get things like Valkyries, which are clearly mythological, and really kind of part of the male warrior culture because they serve male warriors. But yeah, nothing remotely in the historical era.
Okay. And here on YouTube about nomad burials in the Ukraine and Russia that appear to be burials of warrior women. Does that make sense?
We have cats fighting.
Yes.
Hear that, but something about Ukraine burials. Yeah. Nomads. Yeah, but that's something else. So, that I don't really know that much about, but yeah, the cats
They're
are.
just having a chat. I mean, it's like a war of words between them.
Yeah.
It sounds like they're having a conversation.
Yeah, this is gonna end.
Yeah, I believe the conversation is stop biting me. No, you stop biting me.
Patty cake.
Yeah.
Okay. Does someone else want to read the announcement so it doesn't sound like Max Headroom?
I don't have the thing up.
Okay, I'll try to read it.
Oh, no, I can bring it up. It only takes
Got
me.
it? Okay.
Not yet, but I can get it.
All right, I'll do the trivia answer.
There you go.
Pierre got the trivia question right. Good job, Pierre.
Huzzah!
The answer was Scooby-Doo. Where are you?
Really?
September 13th, 1969. It's the 45th anniversary.
I basically understood that.
Scooby-Doo.
Okay. No, I don't have it up.
Okay.
I'm sorry, it's not.
I'll try. I don't know if you can hear me. Here's our announcement. Watch skeptic.com or
WatchSkeptic.com.
sign up for eSkeptic on the site for a new blog called Insight coming next week with a bunch of secret authors, including some of the virtual skeptics.
Did everybody get that? We can't ask them if they got that.
Insight at skeptic.com.
Insight at skeptic.com, and you can sign up for the eSkeptic, where the announcement will be made at skeptic.com/eSkeptic/sign up.
Okay, time for books.
Books.
Who's got a book?
Oh,
I got a book.
I have an announcement too. I'm sorry.
Go.
I was on Strange Frequencies Radio this week, talking about the Brzezinski campaign, which we've kicked up a notch and is going very well. If you want to find out about it, it's going really well. So go there. Also, Eve and I are both on Skepticality this week.
No, we're not, because it's.
Oh, that's right. It's next week. It's delayed. Okay, so you're gonna get another whole dose of Vikings down the line. So yay.
Are we ready for books?
Yeah, who's up first?
I got a book.
Okay.
A recent endeavor led by educational researcher Charles Blach, I don't know how to pronounce that, The Wabash National Study of Liberal Arts Education reported equally discouraging findings using different multiple choice assessment instruments and analyzing the data for more than 3,000 students from 19 institutions. The study found that students have made no measurable improvement in critical thinking skills during their first year of college. Low gains reported by the CLA are thus not simply an artifact of our measurement strategy, but a disconcerting reality. Perhaps we are not following students long enough. Perhaps students will make notable strides in the last 2 years of college, substantially improving their skills in critical thinking, complex reasoning, and writing by the time they graduate. While we are optimists at heart, there's plenty of reason for doubt. The Wabash National Studies reported that students' academic motivation and interest in academic subject matter declined during their first year of college, leaving little hope that they would notably improve their academic skills in subsequent years. At least one study has indicated that most of the gains in general skills occur in the first 2 years of college. Moreover, many good indicators of good educational practice do not increase or become prevalent as students advance through higher education. Seniors do not spend much more time studying than freshmen. I could go on, but that's getting long.
So basically an argument for bringing back corporal punishment.
In college.
Yeah, absolutely.
Nice. Who's next?
I'll go.
Bob? Bob.
Pound pastrami, canned kraut, 6 bagels, bring home for Emma. I'm just being cryptic.
Shortly before sundown, Aude mounted her horse, dressed in breeches, to be sure. The boy followed her on a second horse, but could hardly keep up with her flying pace. She rode southward over Sailingdale Heath, not stopping until she reached the wall of the hayfield at Loyer. There she dismounted and told the shepherd to look after the horses while she proceeded to the house. She went up to the door, which was unlocked, into the fire hall, and found the bed closet where Thord lay sleeping. The door was closed but not latched. She entered the bed closet where Thord slept on his back facing upwards. She woke Thord, but he only turned over on his side when he saw some man had come in. She drew her short sword and struck him a great wound on the right arm, which cut across both breasts. She struck with such force that the sword lodged in the wood of the bed.
I'm going to get books because that would be too painful. Barbara, what's your book?
My book is, Academically Adrift by Aaron Aram and Josipa Roxa, Limited Learning on College Campuses.
Okay. Bob?
Walter M. Miller Jr.'s A Canticle for Leibowitz. Awesome book. Great science fiction. Read it.
Eve?
Lockstyle Saga, translated by Kaniva Kuntz, an awesome saga with lots of strong women. You should, including that transgressive one who attacks someone. You should read it. It's from the Sagas of the Icelanders with a Viking ship on it.
Okay. I think
I can't wait to hear you read the closing credits. This is going to be great.
it's going to be terrible, but here we go. Let's get the music. I don't know why I'm even bothering with the music.
No, it's going to be good.
Now we dance.
Virtual Skeptics is an independent production of What'sTheHarm.net, Skeptical Humanities.
Saddest thing ever.
Gregory, ICBS Everywhere, and Doubtful News. Our logo is Sarah Mayhew at sarahmayhew.com. Our theme music is by Music Ant and is used with permission.
We are so lucky to get Sarah on to art.
Oh.
Are we out? We're not out.
Are we out?
No.